us this morning, and we are just anticipating a great time of sharing and hoping that you get to walk away from our time together this morning with a nugget or two, a piece of information that maybe you didn't have before that you can immediately implement into your family's plans, help make this get off to a great start. Before we get going, I want to introduce to you the folks, in addition to myself, who are going to be presenting. My name is Chris Backer. I'm going to be joined this morning by Mark Olson, who is the president of GuideStream Financial, and also Tim Burkhart, who is the vice president of our estate and gift planning. We're going to be sharing with you this morning and interacting with you. And before we dive into our material this morning, I want to turn it over to Mark. Up with word.
Thank you, Chris. Heavenly Father, we thank you for your work in our individual lives and for the privilege of serving you. We thank you for being the example to us of what true love is. And we're grateful for this time to focus on ways that we can better serve you and show love to our family. And so we pray for insight, wisdom, and your blessing in all that is said and done. And we ask things in your name.
Thank you. And one more thing before we get down to our presentation today, we want you to make sure that you've got marked on your calendar for the second Thursday of March, our next presentation that's going to be focused really on March Madness. And we're not talking about basketball here, but we're talking about some things that may just drive you crazy, just like this gentleman right here who doesn't know quite what to do when he's dealing with his taxes. We're going to talk about some strategies on how to offset a taxable event. So maybe you've sold a piece of property, or you're looking to sell a piece of property or an asset, and there's going to be some taxes due when you engage in that type of activity. And we want to talk about some ways that you can minimize. And it doesn't matter how old you are, whether you're just young and getting started or into your retirement years, there's going to be some tips for everyone. I'll also talk about that ever-changing IRS law that deals with making IRAs and everything related to taxes. So we encourage you to join us here.
Chris, it wouldn't surprise me between now and then that Congress passes some significant law, and we'll be doing some kind of 11th hour change to our presentation. You want to be tuned, and I'm sure it'll be exciting, and we'll have some great materials. And if there are any questions that may come up along the way during our presentation, feel free to send them to us at webinar@fmfoundation.org, webinar@fmfoundation.org, either during our presentation or if you look at your icons at the top of the screen, you can certainly use those icons to as well ask questions using software provided. And so we just want to encourage you to engage and also to ask as many questions you may have. So without further ado, Chris, why don't you take us into our topic today?
And really what we want to start talking about today is putting in place what we're calling a loving plan for all of life's seasons. No matter where you are, again, if you're just starting off, maybe you've just gotten married and you've got a couple of young children at home, or maybe you just became an empty nester, or perhaps you are well into your retirement years and you're looking at ways of maximizing the resources that the Lord has given you in retirement. We want to give you some strategies, give you some tips of how to put a plan in place that reflects a lot of love for your family, doing things that are going to provide for your family now, during a potential incapacity or after you pass away, and also providing for those ministries, charities that are near and dear. We're talking about putting a loving place for no matter where you're at in life. And I think as believers, start thinking about love, start scripture, really just.
Well, yeah, we all think about love, certainly from 1 Corinthians 13:4, and it's just the love verse is what I always refer to, and I see it in many homes as I go about and travel. And some interesting things came to mind as we were considering this presentation here today and Valentine's Day, and of course this verse. So I'll share that with you, but let's read the verse. Love is patient, love is kind, it does not envy, it does not boast, it is not proud, it does not dishonor others, it is not self-seeking, it is not easily angered, it keeps no records of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes, always perseveres. And as I began to think about this particular verse, I began to organize it, and I was in a small group, and one person shared an idea to take love is put all of those positive things on one side of a 3x5 card and say, I'm going to really focus as a believer on these types of things, being patient, being kind, rejoicing in truth, protecting, trusting, hope. We have hope in Christ, and to persevere through all of life's challenges come my way. On the contrary, certainly on the other side of the thing, we don't want to envy, we don't want to boast, we don't want to be prideful, we don't want to honor others, we don't want to be self-seeking, keeping record of wrong, fight, and evil. And the more I thought about this, Chris, I suddenly realized that as stewards, God is really calling us to love for all aspects of our life. Love itself would say, other aspects of our life. Money, what we do with the resources, reflects our love, what's really in our hearts. And so, thinking about that same list, good steward is kind. We rejoice in truth. Certainly want to protect what God has entrusted to us without terrible the talents provide, and how we want to do a good job. We want God back and say, well done. Celebrate what God has done in our lives. Certainly, so He's entrusted to us, has given us hope, helping us say, hey, it's more than just about the money. It's about what God's done in our lives. So a good steward should reflect each of these things. And then money should not be used to do these other things. Be envious. How many times have you seen that person that bought the red sports car with the convertible and you say, oh my goodness, I would love to have one of those things. And certainly those are the areas where temptation can slip in. Or maybe you did get the red sports car and that's all you can think and talk about, tell other people about. Certainly this is where Satan can get a foothold in our lives and work in ways that we wouldn't want him to. Ultimately, as we see in the list there, delighting in evil, take us down the slippery path that we all want to. So I thought these were great insights for us as stewards to say, we want to be about this. We're getting ready to talk in a couple minutes about investments. How important is it to be patient with our investments? Who knows where it's going to end? Ups and downs already along the way. And so we certainly don't want to just jump in and out and back and forth. We want to have a plan.
Then I think so. The bottom line here, we want to be on the left-hand side. We don't want to be on the right side.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So good steward. We want to be a good steward. We don't want to do those other things.
Exactly.
Give us a couple other scriptures, Tim, that might be helpful as we kind of lay the foundation where we're going.
Well, we're talking about evil. Certainly, we don't want to go down that path. And so, the first verse that came to mind was 1 Timothy 6:10. For the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. Some people, eager for money, have wandered from the faith and pierced themselves with many griefs. And as I read this verse, I was thinking, piercing. That really struck me. I think that how life can throw different events our way really challenging. So naturally, we want to do the best we can. I think stay on that other side of the 3x5 card and think about the positive aspect. Then, of course, from Matthew 6:24, I'd like to share another verse that I thought was very appropriate. No one can serve two masters. Either you'll hate the one, love the other, or you will be devoted to one, despise the other. You cannot serve both God and man. So it's so true. Good reason why we as Christians during Valentines and every day want to be in the Word, in the Scripture, see what God is sharing with us. One of the thoughts that came my way was just the whole story of Ananias and Sapphira. Here's a picture. beautiful done by Raphael, but it just was a reminder to me of the gravity issue of what God really thought about it. Obviously, judgment here was very swift. As simple as a lie about how money was, what was going to be done, and how God felt about that relation. How we are even tempted in our relationships as we work with all kinds of people in our workplace and family. Certainly, honesty and sharing exactly where we're at is one of the most important. Money.
That is, when you see a picture like this and you really rethink that story, the weight of what it really means to be a good steward and to be a good manager really kind of comes heavy on you. And even in our today's world, there's some practical things, Mark, that we can do to really help us get started on the right track when we're really longing to be good stewards and be on the left-hand side of that slide that you showed. Mark, can you walk us through a couple things that we can do today in a real practical way to help us be good stewards?
Sure, I'd love to. And this is showing some of the building blocks for stewarding our financial lives. And everything on here really relates to planning, saving, and giving. And it's our conviction that if we could collectively spend more time planning, we'd be able and more focused on methodical, consistent saving, which would put us in a position to give much more effectively with our time and our money. And when we work with people, with their families and ministries and their needs, there's a gap in people's ability to give. And so if you go upstream and focus on planning and saving, we really think that unleashes much more power to give. So in this progression, down at the bottom, there's a little focus on budgeting, and it doesn't matter if you're just starting out or you're coming close to retirement, consistently looking at what you do with what you have is the issue there, with tithing as a critical commitment inside of that. And so it's a way to tune up and kind of maximize the impact of what you currently have. And hopefully there's a little contentment in there that you're satisfied with what you have, but you're trying to make the most of it. Then the second building block is really insurance, and Tim had mentioned earlier about an aspect of love is protecting, and insurance is really a tool to make sure that you're protecting your family if bad things happen. And it has a huge effect on your loved ones if something occurs and it isn't covered. And so that is another critical piece on the checklist.
I think I've heard it said that buying insurance of some sort is one of the most selfless purchases you can make. If you really love someone, say you love your spouse, you love your children, you love your grandchildren, whoever it is, buying insurance generally isn't something that's going to benefit you at all. I mean, there's sometimes, in some rare cases, but really buying insurance shows that you love somebody a whole lot more than you love yourself, and that is probably one of the selfless kind.
Absolutely. And there's efficient ways to get coverage, even efficient ways that people can help you do that where they're not going to have their pocket.
The other thing is managing risk. So that's what you're doing. You're saying, certain risks, because I plan, taking the time to put things in order, then I know that I can take certain risks for that kind of thing. Then there may be certain other things I cannot afford. So I buy insurance cover those really important. And the only way we can answer the question is having a plan in place to help us.
Right. And life insurance and disability are basic places to cover. The next item is financial and estate planning, and that's one of the things that thrill us here because we get to come alongside people and help walk through those portions of their financial lives and get above it and start with really what are you trying to accomplish, what are your goals, what do you care about, and then step back and say what steps would we recommend or can you do to maximize your probability of achieving your goals and having the impact that you desire. And so that's a critical process. And in America, it frankly is a huge missing link. It's something that in America, we all kind of intend to do next month or next year, and it is a powerful contributor to effectiveness. And we're thrilled to come alongside people and help them do that. And what we find every time is that when you look clearly at what you're trying to do and how to get there, it brings not only understanding, but a sense of peace. And in a couple, it also brings unity. So out of that, another item is an emergency fund. It's a pretty basic item, but it's also something that isn't thought about enough because of things happen with the roof or the furnace or the car. If you have a place to go, it'll allow you to keep on track with your plan. And if you don't have an emergency fund, it takes you off track, and that creates other issues. So then part of any plan really involves looking ahead to education needs, retirement needs, and having methodical, consistent saving. A lot of times that's tied to choices of maybe spending a little less and saving a little more. And that consistency over a long period of time, starting with something very simple and basic, but doing it consistently is where the power is. And part of the reason to do that is retirement. We have that up there as a focus, not because it's me time, where everything becomes inward focused on us and our pure enjoyment. Retirement is normally a 30-plus year issue, and from a stewardship standpoint, that has enormous capacity to help spend more time with your family and actually contributing time and energy into ministries and causes that you care about. So planning ahead towards that is a huge stewardship issue, and then also relates to distribution at the end of our lives that we're going to spend a lot of time on coming up.
I like this, Mark, because again, many of you may recognize the plan, Save and Give. That's from a popular Wesley sermon, encouraging us as Christians to think in this manner. Of course, he's a very logical thinker, great model for us.
And this next slide is just a quick snapshot in financial planning. What it is it's a process that allows us to see how particular individuals' goals relate to their current situation. And like in this slide on the left side, it can identify gaps or shortages, and that isn't intended to focus on guilt or feelings of being overwhelmed. If you identify gaps, then you can look at ways to address that. There's options and there's choices that can be made early on that can greatly affect that. Normally, those can relate to saving more or spending less or taking a little more risk on the investment side. And so that also brings hope when we are able to go through this process.
There's a great resource on the website here at www.guidestreamfinancial.com, and you can confidentially go on the site anytime and just enter in some basic, simple numbers that might relate to you personally and say, here's how much money I've saved in these various different areas, and assuming this kind of rate of return. As you see in this particular example, the first time this individual ran this, there was red there at the top of the graph indicating that there's a shortfall in what they were proposing. Then they could simply make minor revisions, and like Mark was saying, you simply invest more now. We have enough time to do that, or you can maybe take a little bit more risk, or third, you can work a little bit longer and hire a little bit later. Those three combination of things usually gets you where you're at on the fixed side there, where it says essentially goal coverage 100%. I mean, that's what we like to happen.
Yeah, and it's really not all about just accumulating dollars, is it, Mark? It's really about how you allocate those dollars and make sure that they're invested in a way that's consistent with your goals, correct?
Right, and one more comment about that. When we look at looking ahead and saving and accumulating, another thing we try to do is keep a focus on the impact of tithing. And tithing is something that may keep less dollars going into savings, but we want to continually keep ourselves and others focused on what is the exponential impact of tithing over a lifetime. Just as assets can grow and compound, so can the effect of a consistent tithe over a life. And so we want to always keep that balance perspective on saving, but also what the effects of your giving are over your life.
I just went to dinner with someone last night, and they were telling me about their college experience, getting their first job, and how they stopped tithing because of all the pressure they felt. Of course, it was quite an interesting story about all these little things that started happening in their life. It's like, I just couldn't handle it anymore and decided I'd go back to, keeping it simple. I'm just going to give it to God.
So there's a lot of aspects to financial management. One of them is if there are, as your savings accumulate, how you allocate the assets is important and where you invest those. And so we are convinced that asset allocation is a critical aspect of stewardship in allocating assets across all the asset classes in the investable universe, and then within those asset classes having specific or a variety of funds inside each asset class is a wise approach. And we say that because we think that is the wisest way over the long haul to meet goals effectively. This next slide relates to asset allocation, and it's very busy, and we're not going to dive in huge detail, but if you look at each year, this highlights each asset class and how they performed, what the return was each year. If you look at that, it rotates consistently, but there's not a real pattern to it. And because of that, paying attention to like financial and economic forecasts and trying to predict which sector is going to be the next high performing one, we frankly don't do that because it's unknowable. And if you look at that chart, the historical fact is that it is unknowable because those things move around. So we believe the asset allocation is the wisest approach, and that's actually a profession of humility to use asset allocation, because we're saying it's unknowable how to make those calls, make that timing. And we think that's tied to the attributes of patience and perseverance that Tim had highlighted, and we believe that's the wisest way to steward those assets.
And really, Mark, you know what I've heard some people say, and some people do a good job of managing this all on their own, managing their asset allocation. But they think that they don't need to involve someone else. I can do it all on my own. And I think a great way of showing, again, a spouse you really love them. And, I can't claim to know everything. I don't know how that chart works. I don't know how they do the asset allocation. I think one of the best things to show someone, best ways to show someone you really love them is to say, I don't know it all, but I'm going to involve somebody that I know is somebody that's really professional in the area, like the advisors.
And a whole team.
A whole team of those people, and realize this world is a whole lot bigger than just me knowing. I want to show you I love you. Let's involve it. And I'm going to change gears here a little bit. While we still have our faculty, boy, it sure is easy for me to know it's in question right now. But while we're living, still have our faculties, I can choose to work with GuideStream Financial. What happens if I get to the point where I am incapacitated? I no longer have that choice. I know during my lifetime it's right that I want to work with the advisors at GuideStream, but now I'm incapacitated. I don't have that ability any longer. I want to put somebody in charge of my finances. I want to maintain that through a special legal document, general durable power of attorney. I'm able to name a person who I think has my best interest at heart and is going to be able to care for everything that I normally can manage during my lifetime may be potentially taken away from me or not managed in if the court is appointed. With a document like this, Mark, I'm still in control. I'm able to care for all of my assets in a way that still provides dignity, still is consistent.
It's a really important thing. A lot of people shy away from doing this. I think it has to do with dying. In fact, the next few documents we get ready to talk about really give us dignity during our lifetime, carry out our wishes, have the type of respect our families deserve to have. care for the right issue, try and have the people in place for those. So, Chris, this is dealing with finances. Why don't you talk to us for a little bit about health?
Tim, just a little bit before we started here this morning, I had a conversation with whose basic concern centered around diagnosis of husband cancer. They wanted to make sure, they kept saying on the phone this morning, are we going to be okay? Dug underneath that and dug into it a little bit more. We realized what they're talking about. Do we have documents? Husband no longer make decisions for himself. Am I listed? Am I the person who can make those healthcare decisions for him? Am I the person listed to make financial decisions for him? The answer was yes. What a great way for show love for wife, and he named her to be that person who has these documents in place.
Another important aspect of that is I'm hearing it. We need to look at these documents periodically too, just to make sure one way of loving our family is to say, hey, still working what we want to have her, or if they have a question, reading it through. Giving someone a call and say, hey, I don't understand. Help me better support.
A document that goes really hand in hand with what's called a healthcare power of attorney. In some states, it's called a living will. And that's a document that says if my condition has deteriorated to a point where I'm just being kept alive through artificial machines, feeding to ventilators, this document really says what you want to have happen. You've in advance, this is what I'd like to happen. Document that says it's okay to let me go home. I've got a heavenly home to go to, so don't keep me hanging on here if my quality of life is what it was during those days. You're going to appoint the person you want to carry out.
I'm terminal, have an irreversible illness, I'm not going to get any better by the opinion of two or more pending physicians. So, like the healthcare power of attorney, I'm deciding for myself to say, this is what I'd like. I want to be hydrated. I don't want to not want right. Seems like to me that's a really important document to have in place. And I'm just also looking at the name here, Living Will, and having worked with a number of people over the years, I think people confuse this document. Living will, living trust, will, trust, revocable living, all these words all kind of tend to blend together. But specifically here, this is not a will. This is not a living trust. This is a document that helps provide final life.
And I think you'll help us out here in a little bit, just kind of digging into a little bit more of those terms and how the rest of that's it. Another way that we really can show love for people that Lord has entrusted to us, our family, is by putting some provisions in our legal documents, in our will, or our trust, that deal with guardianship. So that is, if I pass away, I'm no longer able, obviously, to care for my children, I'm allowed through a will or a trust, naming the people who I feel are going to be the absolute best caregiver. State that you reside in certainly has a plan who would get those children. If you decide not to put a plan in place, that may not be consistent with what you want to have happen. Maybe there's a family member who would be a great caregiver, maybe next to line according to state statutes, but they may not have a faith like you do in the Lord. I really want my children to be raised in a home. They're going to hear about Jesus. You have that guardian in children placed in which schools are everything.
Chris, usually you think about the children living with that guardian. That doesn't always happen. I mean, the guardian has the power to work with other people, given circumstances, to care for the children, have certain needs, have you. And I think sometimes people avoid this whole decision of doing planning because they're afraid that, quite honestly, there's no one better than them to care for these children. And so I would just encourage people to make that decision to say, let's put somebody down here realize that there are a lot of little things that professionals, good Christian attorneys, put into documents, help people, even if none of these people work out. There's just to trust God and realize that He's in control. We have even language that we put in documents. Say, hey, if these people don't work out, the pastor of my church I'm attending at the time would recommend or nominate to the court a suitable family. And so lots of neat little things that we put into plans sure that things do go better than we fear.
And the reality is, whoever you name is probably going to be better than the person in court now. So even if you're stuck, like you said, name somebody. It's going to be better than the alternative of the court just coming up with a person. An extension of this is now you've listed a person who's actually going to be the actual caregiver, the guardian of your children. Now you can actually name a person who's going to be the trustee for any dollars that are left behind. You can set up a minor. Any child that's under the age of 18 really can't receive dollars to care for on their own. These dollars need to be put in a special. You have the ability, their parent or their guardian, deciding if you're no longer here, who's going to be the person managing those dollars, and then just as important, when do those children receive those dollars out? And so in most states, that magic age is 18. Child can receive money. Really, that may not be the best age for a child to receive a big. Maybe they're at that point realize they probably should be to manage their own money, or maybe they're engaged in a lifestyle that they just received a large sum of money. It could be just a big detriment. So you've got the ability by setting up a trust like this of deciding who's going to manage those dollars and how and when do my children receive those dollars. Or is it going to be in maybe over a few years, every 5 years they're going to receive a certain amount of dollars. So really it can be as creative in that way as goals.
My observation is that there's a lot of males that may not be fully mature till their low 30s, so you might want to meter it out over a period of years up to that point.
A father of boys. A great reminder.
And let's carry that on one step further. Maybe you have the privilege of being the guardian or a parent to a child that has some special needs. They're receiving Social Security income, Social Security disability. We know how important those dollars can provide to care that child, and sometimes how difficult those dollars can be to receive. One of the big things that you want to put every vision in place to make sure it happens, those dollars continue to flow to that child. We don't want any interruption. And oftentimes, if you're a good saver, if you're a good planner, and you have the desire to leave some money to that child, it's not set up in a proper way. Those dollars can disqualify that child who's receiving this income. It can disqualify receiving several. So by you setting up a special trust, this can be part of your will, or it can even be trust all on its own, called a special needs trust. You can put dollars into this trust for this child, for their benefit, and have this child not be qualified. You have the ability of naming a trustee yourself who is receiving those dollars for this child, and that person deciding whatever that child. And then, of course, there may be some needs past that child. So if that child no longer needs these dollars, or passes another person's care, or perhaps benefit ministry or way of
One of the things I like about this, Chris, that again, understand that this provides discretion to a trustee. That's the key aspect of the language of it. You have a trust established, it just automatically pays each month. What would happen in many instances if there are certain government benefits that a child is receiving, such as $500 a month, and then if this trust were paying $200 a month, then in some instances that would reduce the government benefit, reduce it down to the 300, for instance. So the idea is because the trustee has discretionary power, that they may not make a payment, but they may make more payment next month or help them with certain expenditure that they may have in buying a wheelchair or certain type of that the individual might have. So that's an important aspect of it. And also to remember that we think of younger children, sometimes with special needs, but we also, this could be at any age. This could be a person who's well into their elder years that would benefit from trusts like this. Make sure that it's properly structured. I'd like to transition here for a moment, and as we're thinking again about love and Valentine's Day, is that we all have different love languages, the way that we communicate with each other, our families. Understand our love languages with our spouse and children, those who we work with, to know how we're wired. Certainly, if I were to come in and bring a present for one of my coworkers who has the love language of receiving gifts, that may just really make their day. Or in others, it's acts of service, saying, "Hey, Chris, can I help you? The leaves are filling your lawn, and I'd like to come over and help you clear those things out." And so we each have a different love language, and this is some material from Gary Chapman, a popular author. And we just want to encourage you to realize there's a lot of people out there who have the language of giving. Certainly it's popular within Christian circles and friends, and a lot of us may not even know what our love language is. So we put at the bottom of the screen a resource for you. You can go out after the webinar here and go to 5lovelanguages.com and take about 30 comparative questions, figure out what your love language is, and you can say, "Hey, honey, guess what?" and it's a way of improving the language within your family and education. In fact, we're going to be talking now about ways that we give, different ways, creatively, either immediate gifts over a period of time. So giving to our loved ones, help a child or relative be a better person. I think we'd all agree that we want to give in such a way that we don't hurt people, really help be a better person, to carry out their God-given call in their lives, see the kingdom advance. And so there's lots of ways we do this. Stretch it over time. We can give it all at once. We defer it. Certainly there's tax implications at times that we want to give consideration to. So those marry in along with the priorities, come up with a plan that's right for you. In fact, we've even seen plans where you say, "You know what, I want to do that." If we were to cap it and say, "I'm going to give them an equal share up to a certain dollar value," and then say, "Everything above that dollar value, let's do this." And again, sometimes that one idea can be very liberating. And, oh, yeah, that would really make a difference. Because how much is it? Well, if you ask that question, I think you come up with a number of different families. And then certainly the love of giving. We find that good plans tend to reflect the ministries that you are involved in during your lifetime. So to watch someone create a plan that suddenly involved a ministry that children never heard about, no one really knew too much about, almost seems a little ominous in the situation. So we find that good plans, again, are going to reflect where you're involved in your lifetime, your local church, alma mater, again, everywhere you're involved. And the different ways that we do this to achieve a charitable goal that you have, or even to do this, I've seen people who are maybe giving during their lifetime to a scholarship at a particular college or university. So when they die, the thought of that stopping, very. So how would we continue that on? How could we make that happen now? So using things like endowments or scholarship funds something that we do every day. Write them into plans, as well as we create them on the side where people can actually test drive them and see that they work the way that they want them to work. Sometimes we do it in a way that the family is honored. Sometimes we do it in more of an autonomous. And usually people like to preserve lifetime flexibilities over some other aspects of consideration. You want to change your mind, and of course, having a tax deduction is something that warms all of our hearts. Comes down April doing our taxes. So putting these all together in a way that is meaningful to you can really be quite exciting to watch people take the training wheels off of giving and suddenly realize that, hey, riding this thing with only two wheels can be a whole lot more fun than banging around with a training wheel. So we would encourage people to dig into this and maybe even ask us questions as a part of this webinar.
No, I think for as much as an obituary tells who a person was and what they were passionate about, and just gives you a picture of who they were, the person living. I think a person's statement, you look at that plan, family members or others, to be able to look at that and, yeah, that was mom or that was dad, and really see what was important. And what a great way to create a model for future generations.
This particular webinar, we're not going to focus as much on the tools such as trusts and wills, but we did want to mention just for a few moments the thought that it's so important, again, to have the right document for you. So many people will say that by the fact that you've got so much money, you automatically should have a trust versus a will. Generally, we don't focus in that area. We talk about having the document for the document's sake, meaning that if you want to avoid probate, here's just a quick list. Living trusts are primarily a probate avoidance tool, and they even have lots of different names: living trust, loving trust, revocable living trust. It can be rather confusing to the average person who's considering this kind of thing and not working in this area every day. And that's one thing that our representatives can assist you with, is try to figure out, what's the right document for me? Do I want to work in contract law, which basically says that something happens, here's the next step, and beneficiary designations are that way. Certainly revocable living trusts are. Another convenient aspect of a living trust is that it's a private document, not public. So unless you public or share it with someone, no one would really know what the internal wording says on that document. And one of the biggest weaknesses of people that do living trusts is that they don't fund them. So we're here to answer questions and make sure you do that properly, set up accounts of trusts. Then when you don't fund your trust, obviously what next happens is that setting up a probate system. So people that do trust do have what's called pour-over will. Pour-over will, again, is the purpose to pick up those little messages, leave behind, put them into the trust. And I just threw in one last little thought. It was just a fun one, although it sounds not so fun. And that is that a terror clause is pretty common in many documents. If someone doesn't know what's in the document, and if they seek to challenge that document and say, hey, I'm going to get something, I know I can make that happen, and greed starts to set in. Most of these documents are written in such a way that says, you're probably going to lose in that. You lose, not only do you lose case, but you lose your piece of what you would have received in that inheritance. And that always tends to work best within the privacy of a living trust, how a living trust operates. And then on the flip side of a living trust, to show you some of the aspects of a will. A will is an instrument of probate. It only governs what is probated. So again, if you have certain things that are designated by beneficiary designation, those are going to happen by contract law, by operational law. Then everything else probated will happen according to the will. So understand that you could have a more fragmented plan by doing this. Not careful. And so we want to make sure that these documents agree with your will as a legal declaration, not a contract. The end result of a will is usually what we call letters and testamentary that are given to your personal representative, settles your estate, and that person would in fact be carrying out your wishes. Our purpose here is not to say that a will's bad or a will's good or a trust is good or bad, but to say, here to help you get into the right document, get into the plan, get you legal help when you need it, get documents.
Yeah, and Tim, those are great words. But before we close here, I'm wondering if you could take us through just a few examples, some real practical ways that you can give in an effective way to not only your family but to the ministry.
We're going to talk about giving it twice, in fact. We're going to multiply those. I think that would be a Matthew 25 model that most people would appreciate. And let's start while we're living to suggest that you may have an asset now. It could be a stock or a mutual fund, could be appreciated property, rental property, could be a business that you established, worked your lifetime to establish this, or for a period of time at least. And many times people will get to a place in their life and they'll say, sell it, get the money. And so the whole idea here is, be careful. You can sell that asset, and as you look at the picture here, you got a larger house, and then you sell it, and then you pay taxes, and then you have something less than. In fact, I think that kind of looks like a house that was made out of shed. I'm not sure. but it's something less than is the result. And so our goal is to make sure that you don't let this happen, that you have at least what you had when you sell the asset, if not more. And one of the primary tools that we use to do this kind of thing is what we call a charitable remainder trust. I shorten it here to unit trust, where we can take that asset before we sell it, put it into the trust, then we sell it, we reinvest the dollars that are there. In fact, we have all the dollars reinvested. Uncle Sam doesn't take a piece of that. We have all of that to reinvest. And another really cool thing is not only do we avoid the initial taxation of that transfer, right, but the IRS says, hey, we like it. So as a result of liking it, we're going to give you a tax deduction for setting this up. And so instead of paying tax, you're getting money back for having established this type of scenario. Another thing we find that's really popular is that people, they don't just take the money, spend it all at once. They're going to take it anyway. They're going to reinvest it for their personal financial independence. Here we have bottom middle of the screen a husband and wife, and they're thinking maybe they're reaching. That's important. Or maybe they're thinking about their grandchildren. Say, you know what, we want to do this for their benefit, their sake. Or maybe it's a combination there. Do that. Another real important aspect from a tax perspective is that the growth that occurs within these trusts, it's what I call a charitable IRA. Not a legal term, but it's charitable. It's like an IRA in that the money grows tax deferred out to the beneficiary tax. And ultimately, usually most people get more money, like give it twice kind of thing, because do more for the family, then ultimately we can do more for many remainder. What's left in one of the end of its lives or period of years to be designated to your ministry choice.
And you're showing in here, just as an example, a gift of real estate, how you can use real estate. But reality here, one of the best assets probably give is one of an IRA.
Exactly. Thinking about a testamentary situation, such as at the end of life, one area that's very confusing for people is, how do I maximize this IRA? This is income waiting to happen. Many instances, people have taken the recommended minimum distribution, and these retirement plans have become inheritance plans. And a natural thing for people to say, my beneficiary is wife, my spouse, and children, and list those out. Of course, taxation will occur when those individuals receive it. Most people don't take the extra time to think about, well, really take a gift to charity. Why not make that part of it? Well, in fact, more efficient to give these dollars charitable interest than it is to personal. So looking at your plan from that perspective is really important. Now, end of 2014, we'll have the ability to take a prior designate directly, doesn't have to designate directly ministry. number of years now, about 8 years. So it's a great provision, but unfortunately, it's only passed, it seems like, at the end of the year with the tax extenders that are happening. But it's a great idea. It's a great plan to help people. So what we're suggesting here is that think about ministry. Those charitable interests have a great place targeting gifts IRA. One last quick example that I'd like to share with you is, again, taking this all and putting it together, talking about an appreciated business, stock or mutual fund, maybe considering special gift to ministry that you want to provide for your family. As we mentioned before, the intuition is take this money as cash, pay the tax. But if we could get ahead of that situation, plan it out just a bit more, instead of taking that in cash and paying the tax, consider that we might want to use part of it for income. We're not going to all at once. Another piece of that might be actually used for gifts that we want to make. So you create what we call a charitable checkbook. Say, I'm going to set some money aside for 5 years in the future to say, here are from the funds that I intend to give. I'm going to give from that. By taking the time to step back, creating a plan to say, part of this is cash, part of this is charitable gifts, we can suddenly begin to actually do a whole lot better at keeping more money on the table and available for. Essentially what we're saying at the bottom of the screen is we can accomplish times zero tax. Even though you've taken cash, which would be normally taxed from the asset, and then of course offset that. It's a loving plan. It's for all seasons. It can work younger years. It can work in more elder years. The important thing is that you get ahead of it. Say, we want to think this through. We want to think out before we actually get to the closing sale table.
In a lot of these things, especially towards the end where they can get to be, you can have a good intent, but you just don't quite know how to put a plan in place like this. And again, I think one of the best ways that you can show a person you love them is saying, I'm going to involve people that really know this stuff forwards and backwards, can do it in their sleep. And we've got that kind of team here. We're just, the three of us here are just a small part of the team. I'm wondering, Mark, if you might be able to help us understand a little bit more about the advisors that we have here at GuideStream Financial, and tell us a little bit about the process. Makes real concrete.
Yep, well, we have a whole qualified team at GuideStream Financial, and we're an option to help you or others you know with financial planning and investment management. So we have 3 full-time advisors, but they're supported by a whole team of administrative, investment, and technical support. We're all called to be here in a couple differentiators. We really bring a biblical stewardship perspective to financial planning and investment management. And the other thing is we really worked hard at bringing an unconflicted compensation system, and even the holdings we have in the portfolios are unconflicted, and that really lets us focus specifically on what you need without anything tugging us any other way. So we assume that God's working in people's lives, laying on their heart what matters. Our role is come alongside as a trusted guide to help people on their stewardship journey, and it's an honor for us all to do that.
We have a great team here in Spring Arbor, Michigan, but realizing that many of you may not be in Spring Arbor, Michigan. So we've intentionally tried to get as close as we can to everyone that we serve. And these people don't seem close. Believe me, they want to be close, and they are around periodically and traveling. So I just honored to the rest of the team that's available through the field. If you have questions, give us a call, and we're glad to integrate you into our schedules at an appropriate time to answer your questions. Never with any pressure, but just to try to make sure that we are serving in a way that best helps advances your goals. So we have people in Seattle and Los Angeles area, and New York and Florida, and all places in between, crisscross, to serve the kingdom together. So we just encourage you to engage, connect with us. And also, if you may have questions, uh, we are going to do questions in this particular session offline afterwards. But we would encourage you to email us at webinar@fmfoundation.org, webinar@fmfoundation.org. Great place for you to express some thoughts. And every participant, if you wouldn't mind, just sending us a message, say what you'd like to see us present in the future, or what you missed in this particular presentation, or maybe you had some further questions. We'd be honored to help you. And of course, we have another website, fmfgiftplan.org, that has all kinds of great ideas and stories of gift calculators that you can engage with. In fact, you can do kind of like a TurboTax version of estate plan, at least initial questions you have to get through stuff just online, that website. So again, we'd like to thank everyone. Thank you, Mark, for being a part of this time and sharing the financial insights, financial planning, and Chris, all the work that Chris works in the central part of the United States. Honored as well to be a part of this. Next month, don't forget, we have our next webinar and playing all the March Madness of taxes. We're just going to have a lot of fun covering a number of things. Some surprises they all experience. Again, thanks for participating. God bless you. Have a great Valentine.